Jesus entered a village where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary, who sat beside the Lord at his feet listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me." The Lord said to her in reply, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Saint Martha, because she is a saint, perhaps does not have a very good reputation, precisely because of her scolding that Jesus gave her. Well, I repeat, she's a saint. She was extraordinarily generous woman. In that house, 3 brothers, 3 unmarried, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. She was a housewife. Maybe she was the older sister. And suddenly, she welcomes and invites her. Maybe she had invited her from her brother, but she welcomes Jesus with his 12 apostles and possibly with a group of women who always accompanied Christ. Can you imagine a housewife, a large house still visited today in Bethany? The house that according to tradition was of this family, but can you imagine 20 people arriving as guests who do not come for a meal, but possibly to settle there and will spend 1 or more nights? Even if I was prepared, even if I had known days before, that requires organization. It requires having a lot of things planned and then dealing with the unforeseen things. Besides, if she, like her brother and sister Mary, already loved Jesus and that is why they had invited him to their home, they wanted everything to be all right, so that the Lord and his followers would not lack any detail of what they could offer, the comforts that at the time and in that rural house they could offer. Martha was overwhelmed with work. In addition, the sister, as good as Martha, Saint Mary, is not Mary Magdalene. This is Bethany, and Magdala was in north of Galilee. Sometimes they identify them, but it is not so. Saint Mary was also a saint, but she was more of a contemplative type. She loved Jesus like Martha and Lazarus, but she was more into listening and praying. Then Martha reproached her sister not alone, calling her and making apart and telling her, "Listen, I'm overwhelmed. Help me because I can't go any longer. Look, I can't cope. Please give me a hand." She doesn't do this, but goes and reproaches her sister in front of Jesus. I don't know if he would have spoken to his sister before or not, but he reproaches his sister in front of Jesus and is met with a response that he certainly did not expect. Because Jesus, instead of calling Mary and saying, "Look, Mary, I'm so glad that you are listening to my message, but now your sister needs you. She's on the edge, so go give her a hand." Instead, Jesus defends Mary and rebukes Martha. "Martha, Martha, you are restless and nervous about so many things, and only one is needed." I confess that this recrimination of Jesus to Martha, I do it myself many times. Many times because I'm also like that character that I walk around and I don't stop and I get exhausted and I remember this phrase. "Martha, Martha, you're restless and nervous about so many things, and only one is necessary." What is Jesus teaching? Or rather, let's start with what he's not teaching. He's not teaching that there is no work to be done. He's not teaching that you don't have to move on from one place to another to organize things and so that, for example, in this case, a guest arrives, to have the best possible welcome to offer him and what the guest deserves as a guest in your house. That is not what Jesus is teaching. Jesus is teaching that there has to be time for activity and there has to be time for prayer. And he's also teaching that the time for prayer takes priority over the time of activity. And if by being restless and nervous about so many things, good things, let alone bad things, we forget prayer because we are restless and nervous, this is not pleasing to God, and it also harms us. For priests, the great risk is the source of so many sins, is activism. If we do many things from one place to another without stopping, and prayer, and being close to God. And this is the same, perhaps at another level, but it is the same for the laity. I'm not saying that especially for the housewife, but also for the housewife. Why? Because the mother, at least in what I know, and maybe things have changed, but the mother is the one who carries the weight of the house, and when the mother has to work outside of home, she has to carry the weight of the house and of her work outside. And this is not fair, but unfortunately, that is the way it is. The man who is aware and sensitized helps, and that's all there is to it. It helps. The one who carries the burden of the house is the woman. Of course, this should not be so. The task should be divided honestly because both of them also work outside of the home. But usually it happens this way, and that is why the mother is so often exhausted, tired, nervous, because so much burden falls on her back. The more activity, the more prayer we need. We must not forget that an anecdote that at least I heard as true from the superior of a convent of the Congregation of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, the missionaries of charity, in a convent of Africa, a country in Africa where, for whatever circumstances, the work of caring for the poorest of the poor was exhausting, extraordinary. So they have to do 2 hours of prayer every day. The superior begged Mother Teresa in a letter to allow them to do little less instead of 2 hours of prayer, because they had an enormous work to attend to the needy people, to the poor. Mother Teresa answered, instead of doing less, you have to do half 1 hour more. Because otherwise you will do all those things, but you will lose the motivation that leads you to do them. Let us think about this sentence of Jesus to Saint Martha. You are restless and nervous about so many things, but only one is necessary. This is the indispensable one. Then you have to do the rest, but this is the indispensable one. I have discovered that even if I do many things, and I do them, even if I work very hard, and I really do, what Jesus likes the most is when I'm before him in the tabernacle, and I say, I love you. Everything else, the works I do, are concrete, practical expression, the demonstration that I love him. But what he likes the most is when I'm at his side and I tell him, I love you. Although I also tell him, I love you, and I love you too little for what you deserve. And I'm ashamed to tell you, but I love you. And that's what he likes the most. My works show that feeling. But what he likes the most is when I tell him, I love you. When you love someone, what you like to hear the most is that a person tell you, I love you. And when someone loves you, what that person likes to hear the most is you tell him, I love you. Let's do this with God. Let us take the time daily, not occasional, daily time, to be at his feet before the tabernacle like Saint Martha, like Mary, and to say to him, I love you. May it be so.